Hi there, YouTube world. So I just have to do the delay because I don't want the stalker to see me. They come in every live stream that I do for the first few seconds, um, for during the first minute for a few seconds. Um, so I want to weigh in on the politics that have been in the newspaper, in the media lately in Canada regarding uh, puberty blockers for kids that say they are transgender, and how Danielle Smith, so that's the premier of Alberta, she's a right wing premier, uh, is saying that these should not be available to kids. And there's similar politics going on in the US as well. So there's been moves in some US states to ban children from getting uh, what is called gender affirming care. Basically, medical treatment, whether it consists of surgery or hormones, uh, but medical treatment to that allows someone to transition their sex, okay, according to their gender identity. Um, so it's unbelievable how this whole discourse, everything about it in the mainstream media is backwards. The whole thing, right down to the lingo, everything is backwards from how it should be. Okay, and I'm speaking as someone with personal experience, as I've had early onset gender dysphoria my whole life. Okay, so first of all, I want to read an article, and by the way, get used to this type of content on this channel because I'm not going to be uh, doing any more music videos on this channel because YouTube goes insane over copyright. They're just insane over copyright stuff. Okay, so it's going to be just talking about political and social issues like I'm doing right now. Okay, so here we go. So this is an article from the Canadian Press, and the headline, it's from today's date, and the headline says, "Puberty blockers can't be started at 18 when youth have already developed, according to experts." Who are these experts? Puberty blockers have been in the spotlight since Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announced plans last week to ban the medications for children 15 and younger, unless they have already started the treatment. Smith's views about gender-affirming care have drawn criticism from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, but support from federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who says puberty blockers should only be provided after age 18. Here's what healthcare professionals say about the medications and why they are used. So these healthcare professionals are whacked. Okay, let me get. Puberty blockers are given by injection to youth experiencing gender dysphoria, where a person's gender identity does not match the sex they were assigned at birth. The medications block physical changes such as breast development due to estrogen or a deepening voice from testosterone. Dr. Danielle Metzger, a pediatric endocrinologist at BC Children's Hospital, said the blockers were initially used in the 90s to delay puberty for children who started developing sexual characteristics as young as 3. Okay, so that's the medical use for them. So if your 3-year-old starts, growing pubic hair, okay, that would be a situation where I would think it would be okay to use these puberty blockers. It's pretty rare though. That doesn't have anything to do with gender dysphoria. Physicians in the Netherlands started administering the medications for gender non-conforming youth in the 90s before the Vancouver Hospital was the first to use them in Canada about 26 years ago. The effects of puberty blockers are reversible if they are stopped, but taking them allows youth time to decide if they want to continue gender-affirming surgeries, some of which are irreversible. Right. I don't know about the claim that the puberty blockers are reversible. I don't know about that. The average age that youth assigned female at birth start puberty is 10. Oh my God, what Orwellian language. So the average age that females start puberty is 10, while those assigned male typically start at 11. That would be the earliest we would consider using blockers in kids if their body was starting to change and they had gone through the assessment process that we use to decide who would benefit from blockers. Those born as girls can become super distressed about getting curvy and having their period, while youth assigned male are often fearful of becoming hairy as their testicles and penis start to get bigger due to a mismatch between the body and the brain, he said. Their care involves the family, the medical system, and the mental health system. It doesn't involve politicians. Then why are you getting involved in the politics then? You're a doctor. You're saying that you're beyond that. It's, trying to frame it that the healthcare system is not swayed by politics. Yeah, right. Starting puberty blockers at 18, as Polyev has suggested, would be cruel and missing the boat, said Metzger. So there's no point in starting them. He said long wait lists to see healthcare providers already means youth don't start treatment until age 15 or 16 when their sex characteristics have already developed. By then, adolescents who are born a girl or a boy but identify as the opposite gender have endured years of emotional torment and would only have surgery as an option to counter body changes. If you deprive someone of blockers until they're 18, you've made an irreversible decision yourself by forcing a child to go through puberty and forcing them to have body changes that are anathema to them. What are the criteria for starting puberty blockers and how often are they given? Mental health providers must ensure adolescents understand what it means to consent to treatment, including having a puberty blocker regularly injected in their leg. They must also understand the risks and benefits of the treatment and that blockers can be stopped, allowing puberty to continue. They've socially transitioned, but all of a sudden they're getting breasts that they don't want, or they're getting a penis that's starting to grow, and they're getting very upset. So that's when we would introduce blockers. The medications are injected either once a month or every 3 months. Wait a minute. Yeah, every 3 months, but a new formulation that is yet to be used would allow the treatment every 6 months. Side effects. Puberty blockers, which are also used for certain types of cancers and for endometriosis to limit estrogen, can affect calcium metabolism and decrease bone mineral density, possibly increasing the risk of osteoporosis later in life. Teenagers' bones are putting calcium. Okay, blah, 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 blah. However, adding a hormone for those who have been on blockers for about 2 years re-triggers puberty, allowing their bones to start re-triggering. So yeah, it increases your chance of osteoporosis. Okay. If you're barely into puberty, you have no fertility and we're turning it off. The only way to turn it back on is to go through puberty. So, okay, so it makes you infertile. Transgender boys who have already started their period are typically not given blockers, but use a cheaper, easier method, typically the birth control pill or an IUD. Trans girls who are older can store their sperm for later use. Again, we're talking risk benefit here. It's one of the hardest things I think parents have to hear is we're interrupting the kids' fertility. 10-year-old kids don't have any thoughts about having kids down the road generally. How does lack of access to gender affirming care affect trans youth or those experiencing gender dysphoria? Yeah, well, so they're talking about that they need mental health treatment. 30% of youth attempted suicide. Those with limited access to a family doctor or long waits to see a mental health provider, gender affirming care, including puberty blockers, should not be delayed for too long because the emotional toll would be too high. None of this is quick. It doesn't make sense to say no, not until you're 18 from a medical perspective. Politicizing medical care could push some trans adolescents into silence when they may not be getting support at home or school, where they could be bullied. The misinformation out there is really astounding. It gets worrying when our politicians take up some ideas without actually vetting the accuracy of what they're saying. So this is making it sound like these experts are just, sticking to the science and not getting involved in the politics themselves, which of course is a bunch of BS. So I'm going to say right off the bat that I think so-called gender affirming care for underage kids is tantamount to child abuse. That's my opinion. And I think these people need to be sued. Like who are doing this. Like eventually they will be when the kids grow up. Yeah, it's not irreversible. It's not reversible. So, okay, let me back up here. I have gender dysphoria. I've had it since as far back as I can remember. Since before I was even going to kindergarten. So like 3 years old, I was thinking I would rather be a girl and trying to dress up like a girl. Okay? There's two types of gender dysphoria: early onset and later onset. Early onset is the more severe kind, and that's what I have. Later onset is something that I don't quite understand, but it's something that does not develop until somebody's already in their adolescence. So they go through their childhood not feeling like they have gender dysphoria. It's only once they reach adolescence that they start um, showing signs of gender dysphoria. And there's been a huge, like a huge, 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 just huge explosion in in the number of cases of the later onset gender dysphoria, especially among girls. I'm going to say it, girls, the females born with a vagina, okay, born females. There's been just a tremendous explosion of these girls in once they reach adolescence saying that they have gender dysphoria and wanting to be boys. Okay, what's it doesn't quite make sense that there would be such a huge explosion. I think that it has to do with a more general situation of body dysphoria, with girls perhaps rejecting the sexualization of the female body in our modern age, and whereas and so they're the way that it's coming out, the way that it's being socially constructed is gender dysphoria. But I question whether they truly have gender dysphoria the way that somebody does who has early onset gender dysphoria. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that there would have been such a huge explosion in it in the cases. Like, so why was this not a thing before? Like, why did it just all of a sudden start within the past decade? There's such a huge explosion of them, you know? Um, it's it points to points to that there's something else going on that's not medical and that's not uh, located only in the individual, but that there's some kind of a social phenomenon going on that's causing it. It's based like it's catchy. Basically, it's trendy, you could say, and it has to do with it's similar. It's a body dysphoria, dysmorphia, similar to anorexia or bulimia. Okay, it's about these girls trying to control their bodies because there's something about it that they can't accept, that they're struggling to accept. But that doesn't mean that they truly have gender dysphoria, the way that somebody does who has early onset gender dysphoria. Um, so it takes a long time for someone to figure out their identity. And when you are a young person, underage person, you're not going to figure it out. You're not going to figure out your identity until you're an adult. And so once you start going down that path of taking hormones and taking or having surgeries, but even just taking hormones, which is what these puberty blockers are, they're hormones. You set yourself up down that certain path to now identify as transgender. But in a lot of cases, if you don't do anything and you don't take hormones and you don't do surgeries, by the time that you're a legal age adult, you're going to settle upon an identity that is not transgender and that is not saying that you want to be the opposite sex. Notice that that article talked about that there's a mismatch between the brain and the body. So the brain feels that it belongs to one sex and the body is of another. Why does it have to match? Why does it even have to match? Why is there this obsession with making it match? Okay? That's what I told myself when I was dealing with these issues as a young person. Well, why does it have to match? I can feel and express myself however I want, regardless of my physical body. And, but if I was growing up, I mean, now with the way that I was, being so feminine, and I did think at some points that I wanted to be a woman. I probably would have ended up on this path of taking hormones, puberty blockers, and surgeries. I would have probably, if I was growing up today, I probably would have been on that transgender path. But as an adult, I can see how that would not be right because, first of all, yeah, they mentioned in the article high percentage of suicides for people who have gender dysphoria. The suicide rate does not go down even after they've transitioned. They still have mental health problems, people with gender dysphoria, even after they've transitioned. So that doesn't solve the mental health problem. Transitioning doesn't solve it if the suicide rate is still just as high. Okay? In my mind, what solves it is you just have to learn to accept your body. And I know that that's easier said than done, but that's really the only thing, because even if even if you start transitioning, like my thought of it personally was that, okay, if I started transitioning, even if other people thought that I was a girl naturally, I would know that I'm not, and I would still be able to see my male traits when I look in the mirror. And that would always cause me a feeling of unease. And so, I would, yeah, I wanted to be a girl, but I wanted to be a naturally born girl. I didn't want to be something in between. And so, I'm a naturally born boy, and so the only way to resolve this is to get comfortable with your natural body, is to learn how to be comfortable with your natural body, learn how to accept it. And I know that that's easier said than done, and it's always a work in progress. It maybe never is like completely accepted by yourself, but all you can do is try your best. That, to my mind, is better than going down this route of taking hormones and surgeries, which is chasing a dream, chasing an ideal of what you think the opposite sex body would look like, but never actually going to be able to achieve that, no matter how many surgeries and hormones that you take. And you're always going to be able to see that within yourself. Even if other people don't, you'll still see it and you won't feel comfortable in your body. So the only way that you have a chance to actually be comfortable in your body, it is to accept your own body as it was, as you're born with. That is really what I believe. And kids are too young to be able to figure all this stuff out. And I don't believe it's true what they're saying in that article, that taking puberty blockers is reversible. So if you change your mind, you want to stick with your natural sex, just stop taking the puberty blockers. No, because once you've started doing that, once you've started going down that path, in your mind, like, it's going to affect your psychology and how you see yourself. So even if it's technically possible to initiate puberty at a later age after someone has taken puberty blockers, they're already at that point going to be down this pathway. That how realistic is it that somebody would really be able to reverse that? And it is going to and you're going to have certain experiences now that become part of your identity. So you're not going to be able to reverse that. And yeah, it does lead to infertility. And for boys who take female hormones, it can lead to cancer as well. And so perhaps it's true to say, well, to delay taking puberty blockers until you're 18, it misses the point, because by that point you've already gone through puberty. Okay, technically that could be true. That is true. But that doesn't mean that you can't take other hormones. They're not called puberty blockers, but they're still hormones. There's still hormone treatments that you could take that could allow you to change your sex at a later age. Yeah, it's not going to block puberty, because by the time you're 18, you've already gone through puberty. But you can still take hormone treatments to transition your sex. Yes, you can. So that part of the article is wrong. And but I just keep coming back to that I think it's best in terms of your self-image and identity to accept your body as you were born with, instead of going down this route of chasing some ideal of what you think the opposite sex body should look like, and never actually being able to achieve that ideal, no matter how many hormones and surgeries that you take. And that's why the suicide rate is still very high, just as high among these gender dysphoria people uh, after they transition. It's just as high as before that they transitioned, because it doesn't actually deal with the root cause, which is not being able to accept one's body. Okay. And so I would have to say the conservatives got it right to say, yeah, don't do this until, like, these treatments should not be available for kids. They should be something only for adults. That's right. That's right. Because kids are still trying to work it out, figure out their identity, and it's not irreversible. That is not irreversible. Even if technically it could be, it's not, because once you go down that path, you're down that now you've started down that path, and it's changing how you see yourself. And like, look how hard it's been for me, and I'm an adult in my 40s with experience of coming out as gay, first openly gay kid in my school. So, it's not like back in the 90s when that was not easy to do. So it's not like I'm not tough or I'm not used to going against the grain, like I am. But even for me, so I have gender dysphoria, but despite that, identifying with my biological sex. Look how difficult it's been for me. Like, there is basically no support. So, I've been had my career destroyed. It's the main reason why I'm in the terrible situation that I'm in right now, being told to wear a skirt to work. So there's all this support for people who want to transition, but if you don't want to transition, you want to keep your biological sex that you were born with, there's no support for that. Even just saying what I'm saying, like, that would be censored. Like, I couldn't say this on TikTok. It would be censored. On Twitter, for many years, you could not say this. Only when in the past 2 or 3 years did they stop censoring this kind of stuff. Okay? And, the default should always be to stick with your natural sex that you were born with. So the way that article twists it around and says, well, you know, denying treatment for gender affirming care, it just twists everything on its head. And like, I don't know. There's so many cases of people as well. I mean, if you look at Blair White's channel on YouTube, she's interviewed people who've had surgeries and that, and they talk about what happens to their bodies afterwards. And there's just so many cases of, like, horror stories that you don't get to hear about. I mean, this is genital mutilation, is what it is. I mean, there was such a big deal made about female circumcision in Africa. But, like, look at this. This is worse than female circumcision. And, I just have to keep coming back to, why would there be such an explosion of cases? If it truly is a medical phenomenon, why is there such a huge explosion in cases? It's not a medical phenomenon, it's a social phenomenon. Okay? But it's going to lead to very serious, irreversible medical consequences for somebody for the rest of their life. So, yeah, I would agree that kids, underage people under 18 should not be doing this. I don't even think adults, my personal opinion is I don't even think adults should do it. for the reasons that I've just been explaining. But okay, if once you're an adult, you're free to fuck up your life or you're free to do whatever you want. I don't go around telling people that. I don't really go around, I don't, it's not my place to say how another adult should live their life. Yeah, that's what I think. I think that it's misguided to transition your sex. Yeah, I do think that's misguided. Because again, why does it have to match? Why does it have to match to your what's going on in your head? Why can't you just do express what's going on in your head regardless of your body? I don't understand this obsession with making it match. So so I think it's misguided even for adults to take these hormones or do these surgeries. But I don't weigh in on that because they're adults and they're free. Doesn't matter what I think. They're free to live their lives how they want to. But for kids, no, they shouldn't be able to because it is making irreversible changes to their bodies that has very serious consequences, and it's really questionable why they have these supposed gender dysphoria symptoms in the first place. Like I said, this is an explosion of later onset gender dysphoria among females. There's something social going on there. It's not entirely medical or psychological. Well, it's psychological, but based on a social, like trendiness, basically. Okay, so that's what I have to say, and I just think it's the even people who so say they legitimately have gender dysphoria. It's not just a social trend. Somebody even with early onset gender dysphoria, like me. Okay, where is there an opportunity for a young person, a kid, to even see that they have different options? Like this transgender transitioning your sex route is the only way that is ever presented to them as to a way to live their lives. They don't ever get to hear about somebody like me who, okay, yeah, I've got gender dysphoria, but that doesn't mean that I need to transition my sex or identify with a different sex other than what I was born as. I still identify with my biological sex despite that. They're not allowed to hear that. They never ever hear about somebody like that, right? Because like I'm telling you, I was censored. Like remember on TikTok, I had a video that said my personal journey with gender dysphoria and identifying with my biological sex, held for review, censored. But if I was talking about my personal journey, transitioning my sex as a transgender person, as if they would censor that. Yeah, right. No, they wouldn't. So that route, the transitioning route, gets blasted from the airwaves all the time. But they don't ever get to hear about that there's other ways of handling gender dysphoria. It says you don't have to transition. But still you do have gender dysphoria. Like I've had to fight tooth and nail just to be able to say that, you know, and I've had to lose my career and everything. So it's upsetting. It's, to see this in the news. And I think that when whatever is the social trend that is driving this explosion in cases, whenever that starts to calm down and because social trends do reverse themselves, they don't stay forever. Um, the doctors that are pushing this so-called treatment, gender affirming care. I mean, it's Orwellian language, but these doctors, these so-called medical professionals who are pushing this, they are going to have to account for themselves when the trends reverse, and when more of these kids grow up and start regretting what they've done and finding that they can't reverse it, and that's when these people will be getting sued, and so they're portraying themselves, these medical professionals are portraying themselves as though they're above politics, but they're really not, because all of this is socially constructed. and they are part of the social construct. They're driving it in a large way, socially constructing this huge surge in so-called people with later onset gender dysphoria and then transitioning their sexes. I mean, if we didn't have a medical system that pushed this, if the medical system would present people with the same kind of options, like, okay, you can transition or you might not. You could also live your life not transitioning, and that doesn't mean that you have gender dysphoria, that you don't have gender dysphoria. Like, do they ever hear that message in the medical system? I don't think so. I don't think so, because there doesn't even seem to be any awareness of it, that it's even a thing. I don't know of any other person besides myself who says that they have gender dysphoria, but identifies with their biological sex. I mean, it's just unheard of. So these young people are not getting exposed to different alternative options of how to handle their gender dysphoria. And later on, though, a percentage of them will regret it and will turn on the system that created this. And it is akin to female circumcision. It is akin to also mass sterilization programs, eugenics, and it's horrendous. It's horrendous. And that's basically all I want to say about it for now. I mean, there was some hospital in Britain that was one of the leading hospitals that started with the sex change surgeries back in the 80s, and they've turned against it. Okay. People who have long-term experience with this have seen the pitfalls and have turned against it. Okay. Not to mention, I mean, of course, it creates a permanent market for big pharma. I mean, who's benefiting from all this? Well, the pharmaceutical companies that sell the hormones, and I suppose the doctors who do the surgeries. Yeah, it's building them up into superstars for now, until the tide turns against them. That's when they'll get sued. That's all I have to say. Peace out.